Hello everyone, this is part 16 of What If Naruto formed a new team, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Tama watched Ninja scrambling to remove Sato from the arena below, while Gaara was tackled by his not-so-thrilled teammates. She had honestly believed that Sato was going to win. Another truth, however, was that she did not very well know the extent of power his opponent possessed, or most of the other competing genin for that matter. I was so sure he was going to do it, he tried so hard. It's as if he's been attacking a brick wall all this time. Miserable over his defeat and more so over his injuries, Tama stood and proceeded to scoot down the aisle, not wanting to see any more of the upcoming fights. Sato didn't deserve to be beaten like that. I just don't understand it. She was halfway up the stairs to the second level when she heard a cry from the crowd, followed by a deafening crash from where the Hokage and Kazekage had been seated. Tama stumbled, knocked over by the force of the nearby explosion. She could only see a cloud of smoke and dust from where the Sandaime had been, but it was then she felt her heart begin to beat frantically in her see, something's very wrong. Relax. Stay calm and just keep moving. Whatever's happening, the Leaf Ninja will. She frowned at the soft, misty feathers drifting in front of her face, making her eyelids feel heavy. It reminded her of the irritating genjutsu Sato would practice on her just to get on her nerves when he was bored. Release. She had muttered it with a seal in annoyance, not sure where exactly it had come from. The black-haired girl brushed off her pants and proceeded up the stairs with a huff, somewhat nervous, not overlooking all of the people in the audience who were nodding off as she passed by. Was it a sleeping genjutsu? Tama asked herself quizzically, not comprehending it. Why would they put the whole audience to sleep if the exam isn't even close to being finished? Unless it had something to do with that blast. She planted her feet on the second level and rolled up the sleeves of her shirt. The ice blue color clashed with the tan of her skin, making her very noticeable. Am I the only one who's awake? Just what is going on here? In the back of her mind, Tama was aware that some sort of attack was beginning. Even if she lacked the knowledge of who was responsible and what the goal of the raid was, she knew that if she stayed she'd soon be in no better physical condition than Sato. Trying not to panic, she trotted down the empty overhang, searching for signs of any other leaf shinobi. To her dismay, she saw no one who was awake. Over there. He missed one. Tama snapped her head around to see a ninja garbed in dark attire pointing at her from his position concealed within the audience. Get her before she leaves. A moment later she was running full out down the hall, keeping track of her pursuers as they appeared in her peripheral. She doubted she'd get away if they followed, but she wasn't yet frightened. 3 of them blocked her path and 1 stopped behind her once she halted. Tama felt her stomach do a flip at the sight of their headbands. Sound ninja. What is it that you're planning? Be a good girl and go back to sleep now, what do you say? The leader, it appeared, didn't seem interested in fighting. He crossed his arms in amusement. You don't have anything to worry about. Her fists balled automatically and she leapt. The Otonin on her far right reacted the fastest, moving to counter her. She tripped him with no effort and let his head connect with the nearest wall, while delivering a pitiless uppercut to the leader who followed. She could hear him gag as he bit his tongue off. The last 2 attacked in unison, and she took an offensive stance, her face composed. Mito diversionary tactic. She leapt up and they skidded to a stop, unable to evade as her hands swept down and knocked their heads together. After that she chose not to loiter. Tama continued running, knowing they'd be following her again soon enough. She wore a smug smile at the fact they hadn't realized she could fight. I hope they don't forget they got their bee kicked by a girl. Her heart sank as another sound shinobi appeared ahead of her, drawing out kunai. Her hands went to her sides, ready to counter with her own knives, yet she had none. Well duh. She mentally herself, ready to strangle her parents for telling her it was impractical to carry weapons around. From now on I bring 'em, even if it pisses 'em off. Tama put her arms up in front of her, preparing to block the projectiles that were coming at her, except that they didn't hit. Guy exploded onto the scene with a valiant cry, knocking the sound ninja out instantly with a flying kick. Uncle Guy. She was relieved to see a familiar face and scurried over to him. He gave her an expectant look. This is no time for games, Tama-chan. Our village has come under attack. Her onyx eyes were wide at the news. You must leave the stadium immediately, these ninja are treacherous. But I don't have any weapons with me. Tama felt her voice crack nervously. Do I have to go alone? Another Oto nin approached and Guy knocked him out and tossed him down the nearby stairs. You will join Lee and Tenten once you are outside, understood? I've sent them there already and they will be waiting for you. Tama crouched down over one of the ninja her uncle had pummeled, examining his holsters and took what weapons she pleased. Okay, I'll find them. What about you? I must defend this place for now. I will find you when I can. Guy gave her a reassuring grin. Now go. With a compliant nod she departed, continuing down the walkway. She ran past Kakashi, who was courteous enough to dispose of a lone sound nin who began to follow her. Tama hadn't exactly planned an escape route, but thankfully she was a frequent visitor of the arena and knew its layout well. She turned right into a closed stairwell and jumped over the railing, landing silently on the floor below. After verifying the coast was clear, she proceeded to slink down the nearest hallway. Every sound that echoed in the hall had her on edge, even her own footsteps. She peeked around a corner and pulled her head back, waiting for a sentry sound ninja to pass by. Tama took a deep breath and then moved ahead, sneaking down a small, easily overlooked corridor where an emergency exit was closed off by a lock and chain. With Mito strength, she pulled one of the double doors off of its hinges. Once outside, Tama abandoned the exit and fled for the cover of the nearest tree, from which she planned to keep lookout for her uncle's students. She balanced on a branch thick with leaves, hoping it would be enough to keep her out of sight. Where are they? He said they'd be here. Even though she had only waited a grand total of 2.5 minutes, it was more than she could bear. Her anxiety had her legs itching to guide her to the nearest safe place, which was probably no longer safe. Maybe they've already gone ahead without me. I don't blame them. I can barely stand still myself. There was no sign of them and Tama decided it would be wiser to keep going. They couldn't have gotten far. Tama dropped down from the safety of the tree and after a short prayer she bolted. She had known it was risky, but she hoped she would not be spotted immediately when she ran for it. Luck, it seemed, was not on her side today. More of them. Her heart was in overdrive, frenetically delivering B to her legs as a small squad of sound nin chased after her. This is just ridiculous. Taking a leaf out of Lee's book after seeing him fight earlier, she opened one of her own chakra gates and ran pell-mell down the street in a blur of pale blue and black. They notified a group just around the corner, much to her disgruntlement, and she decided it would be better to improvise than to let them herd her farther into the belly of the town where the remainders of their units were most likely waiting. On her way past a sign with directions to the nearest shopping center, Tama reached out and grabbed the pole, letting her pent-up momentum swing her around, back in the direction of her pursuers. She grinned like a madwoman as she soared past them. The squad leader angrily told his cronies to about face. They did so with startling speed and followed her as she disappeared down into the side streets. It was difficult for her not to panic as she ducked into the narrow alleyways with a unit of 5 shinobi on her tail. Tama weaved between buildings cleverly, knowing the area like the back of her hand, yet for all of her evasive maneuvers she could not shake them. Up there. She jumped abruptly, nearly missing her target, and scrambled up a fire escape to the top of an office building. If I go downtown I can lose them for sure. In seconds they joined her on the rooftop, fed up with her antics. Tama backed away from them with cautious steps, nearing the edge of the building. With no warning she leapt over the side, dropping down beyond their sight. A flagpole on the side of the building was her salvation as she grabbed it on her way down, and swung herself neatly to the concrete of the alley below. Her athletics put Sato and Lee both to shame, but she admitted they were nearing her level of mobile artistry thanks to their rigorous training. Tama commanded herself not to get distracted as she wove into the nearby complexes, swerving in and out of streets. Her pursuers were long gone. She'd make sure not to pick up any more of them. High on adrenaline, she scaled a telephone pole and raced along the wire, wanting to get a view of the local area and hopefully her friends. Lee, Tenten, where are you two? While running along the cable she looked off to her left at the business district, observing in the distance buildings crumbling in the wake of a monstrous serpent. In her terror she nearly lost her footing. She returned to the ground, not wanting to see what other horrors were visible from that height. She was becoming frantic because she had not found any leaf ninja. If she did not come up with a new plan, she would still be in danger. I'll just see if I can find Mom and Dad then, if someone else hasn't, she reasoned, fearing for their safety. I don't want them to be in the middle of working when some ninja bursts in on them and... 3 ninja surrounded her and forced her to stop with a hail of shuriken. Tama dodged, alarmed that they had caught her off her guard. They too were sound ninja and she was growing increasingly tired of seeing them. She swallowed the lump in her tea, desperately trying to concentrate. It's pointless to struggle, the shinobi to her right had an almost friendly voice. You should come quietly if you don't want to s. We've had reports about you running amok. It's about time you call it quits, Missy. She steeled her nerves and took a fighting stance that matched Lee's perfectly. I think you should know that I've never declined a fight from anyone. Tama pried a piece of loose pipe from the side of the building to block the volley of shuriken thrown her way and she leapt back, swiping the pipe at the ninja who had snuck up behind her. He knocked away her improvised weapon and she grappled with him, listening to the cracking noise as his arm was removed from its socket. I can't hold out much longer. They may be pushovers in taijutsu, but not in everything. Fortune smiled down upon her at long last. Lee and Tenten came careening down from a nearby rooftop, taking on the last 2 ninja. A hail of knives and sickles stopped one of the sound ninja in his tracks, hitting the backs of his legs. Lee delivered an award-winning kick to the fool who chose to remain rather than flee. Even with his arm in a sling he was able to deal considerable damage. Tama also knocked out her own opponent and grinned at her saviors, tremendously happy to actually see friendly faces amidst the chaos. Tama, we have to head for cover and escort any stragglers to safety before more of them get here. Tenten was beside her a moment later, giving her a rundown of the details. Where were you? We looked everywhere for you. I thought you went ahead without me, she admitted, very sheepish and cross with herself. Lee shook his head. Never, Tama-chan. Guy-sensei trusted us with your safety and we will not fail him. She was glad to hear it. She should have known better from the start. She was out of practice as a ninja and she should not have panicked. Tama followed close behind him as they moved on with kunai out at the ready. A small explosion knocked a brick wall over and a sound nin fell to the ground unconscious with black snakes coiled around his en. They paused, watching in confusion as Anko appeared, looking pleased with her handiwork. She glanced over and raised an eyebrow at the sight of them. What are you 3 gawking at? Hurry it up so we can get to the barracks already. It sounded as if she had been expecting them but they couldn't be too sure. Tenten chuckled weakly and she followed after the Junin with Lee and Tama in tow, wondering what exactly Anko had been doing on her own. Tenten, Lee, Tama felt her see clench painfully. I'm worried about Sato-kun and my parents. Is it right for us to just leave them behind? All of the injured were evacuated from the stadium immediately, Guy-sensei said. Lee repeated, almost parrot-like, Sato-kun will be perfectly fine. But my parents, they work near the business district and I saw a giant snake over there crushing everything. Tama couldn't help the frightened pitch of her voice. I don't know if they're still there or not. Anko paused briefly and looked to Tama. Everyone in that district has already had a Chunin guide them away from the fighting, well, should have had a Chunin lead them away. Everyone who was available to escort civilians to safety is already over there. But let me tell you something, kid. Tama gave Anko her full attention. You better get used to seeing snakes, because the king of them is responsible for this mess. Naruto and Haku had leapt the wall of the stadium without delay, desperate to catch up to Gaara. They hadn't gotten very far from the arena before they were stopped by enemy ninja. Sound. Haku muttered lowly, glancing over to his friend beside him. Are they responsible? The blonde boy cracked his knuckles, glaring at the 4 shinobi blocking their path. Even if they aren't, do we have a good enough reason not to kick their Haku saw his point and threw a round of senbon to distract them, while Naruto and 3 of his shadow clones ravaged the unprepared enemy ninja. The fight hadn't lasted long, but it had wasted time and Naruto couldn't help but feel the pressure begin to mount. Why is this happening now? If we don't find Gaara soon he may lose control again. Naruto-kun, the blonde boy looked to Haku beside him as they raced out of the city and into the woods beyond. I know this isn't helping now, but I confess I'm the one responsible for Gaara's rage, I think. Naruto frowned at him. I guessed as much. But I don't give s what you two were fighting over. If we don't find him, he could get K. I swear I'll never let it happen again, Haku vowed, pushing aside his doubts. I know now that he was truthful and I had no right to judge his family. I know, Haku, Naruto interrupted, his voice quiet, he has what we don't. He's lucky. But none of that's gonna matter if that demon gets loose from his seal. The dark-haired boy fought back a shiver, recalling Gaara's outburst at the end of his match. He followed behind Naruto, hoping they'd catch him before it could happen again. Gaara had gained considerable ground after fleeing the arena. He had reached the forests on the far outskirts of Konoha before stopping, trying to stay in control of his consciousness. More than ever, Shukaku's presence was becoming progressively more difficult to restrain after fighting Sato. Sand had latched onto his arms and he found he lacked the strength to dispel it. This can't happen, I won't allow it. He paused beneath a tall cedar tree, kneeling down in the shade and trying to catch his breath. He'd give anything to be free of the demon's cruel laughter echoing in his head. Don't be frightened, you've been surprisingly fun so far. Helpful too. Now that those other two idiots aren't around you and I can have a little chat. I refuse to indulge your will. Do as you like. It makes little difference, for the next fool to come near us is as good as S, isn't he? Even you like K just as much as I do, I'm sure. It makes you feel satisfaction that even your precious ones cannot give you. I K only when I have to. You hold no sway over my actions. Liar. You are a jealous, carnal being. K gives you more pleasure than even that pink-haired wench you're obsessed with. Leave Sakura out of this. Oh, sorry, Gaara. Does it pain you that she knows nothing of your desire? That you loathe the Uchiha who keeps her under lock and key while you are near? I am not like you. Naruto and Haku will. Eek. I am terrified of them. They'll scare me away and keep you safe. Ha ha. You bring me so much entertainment, small one, more than any of my past jailers. You should be honored. Your very existence is an embarrassment to this world. It is my duty to keep you from harming anyone. We bid you have existed in this world long before humans, you insufferable sack of guts. And if your S for concealing me is so noble, perhaps you'll try your luck at hiding me from that fellow over there. Too caught up in his thoughts to have noticed, Gaara looked up to where a ninja had settled nearby, watching his internal struggle. He was vaguely familiar, but Gaara hadn't recognized him right away with his vision blurred by frustrated tears. His spectator chuckled, "Don't remember me, Gaara? I'm not surprised, you've had a very trying examination, haven't you? I've been keeping track of your more impressive achievements, however," the silver-haired boy sighed, "this village will be destroyed soon, it'll be amusing to watch." Kabuto, Gaara ignored Shukaku's laughter, glaring at the traitorous ninja, "You never were convincing enough for me to believe you were loyal to the leaf." Kabuto grinned at him, pushing his glasses further up the bridge of his nose. "Maybe so, I haven't been the best actor, but I'm glad I caught up with you, Gaara-kun. Orochimaru-sama even admits that none of this could be possible without you, you know. He is not worthy of such les," Gaara hissed, feeling his sand circle around him with malevolent intent. "I will make him pay for what he's done to my teammates." Kabuto frowned. "You can try." He formed a hand sign a moment later, initiating a powerful genjutsu. "Sleep well, Gaara-kun." Gaara could only hear the joyous screeches of Shukaku as his mind faded into darkness. "Stop a sec, Haku-kun." Naruto paused momentarily on a branch after feeling a violent tremor reverberate through the ground and rattle the entire forest. "Did you feel that?" Haku nodded, wary. "Yes, and still no sign of him. Do you think that he may have?" "No. Don't think like that." The blonde boy clenched his fists. "He's gonna be fine, we just have to find him is all." "Hey, Naruto." Naruto turned and he was truly surprised to see Sasuke approaching with a small dog beside him. Sasuke looked rather peeved he had to actually exert himself to catch up with his fellow Leaf Genin. The Uchiha prodigy stopped on a branch across from Naruto, frowning. "Any particular reason your friend decided to run off like that? You'd have an easier time keeping him on a leash." Naruto nodded in agreement. "Couldn't have said it better myself." Haku's face was the epitome of astonishment. He hadn't expected the person Gaara disliked the most to arrive to help them. The dog that had come with Sasuke spoke up impatiently. "Listen boys, I'll be able to track Gaara. I caught his scent trail before we set out. Naruto blinked down at the dog, not very surprised it could talk. Good dog, so where was he headed? It's packing and he's moving erratically, probably due to his injuries. The pug replied, if we don't hurry he'll be halfway out of the fire country before we find him. Seconds later they were soaring through the canopy, following the small brown dog that scrutinized air currents along the way, calculating their course. Sasuke turned to Haku, still unsure why Kakashi had ordered him to follow the runaways. Do you mind telling me exactly what's going on? Gaara-kun is not in a healthy state of mind right now. Haku didn't want to break the Hokage's law at a moment as crucial as this, but Sasuke needed to have some idea of what they were up against, and when I say that, I mean that he is potentially dangerous to himself and those around him. Sasuke raised an eyebrow but accepted it as a valid answer. We have to move faster, we're being followed. Pakken sniffed guardedly as they picked up speed. 8, no, 9 ninja approaching, fast. Pick up the pace. They indeed did gain speed, but it made little difference as they ran for a long while after that, unable to evade their pursuers. We can backtrack to throw them off course, Haku suggested as they descended to the forest floor. We still have some considerable ground over them. Not for long, hurry it up so we can keep moving. Pakken leapt backwards with Naruto and Sasuke as they followed Haku, retracing their steps, careful not to leave evidence of their intentions. They traveled northeast in silence for nearly 10 minutes, but even then it had not been enough to fool the sound ninja following them. It's no good, they're getting closer. The pug was troubled that they had been unsuccessful. We'll have to try something else. A decoy, Sasuke recommended. One of us stays behind to slow them down, that way the others have a better chance of finding Gaara. Haku and Naruto nodded in understanding, before Sasuke added, though the one who does, is likely to S. They paused on a large tree branch knowing it to be the truth. They were low on stamina and chakra after their respective matches, and 1 against 9 enemy shinobi had unfavorable odds. The genin stood in silence, thinking the situation over. It was the only option they had left that was likely to give them the advantage, even at the cost of one of their lives. After a long moment, Haku spoke up, I'll do it. I can stay behind and stall them while you go ahead. Naruto directly protested, no, Haku-kun, let me. You don't have to do this if I insist. Haku's face was grave and he glanced over to the blonde boy and Sasuke. I've made up my mind about this. It's my fault Gaara's been suffering. I must do this. We can't waste any more time. Pakken see in, he stays, he's decided. It's time to keep moving. Sasuke regarded Haku for a long moment. If you're sure, just make sure you get them by surprise. Naruto's face was pained. All right. You stay and we'll go, and you better be careful. When am I not? He offered his worried friend a convincing smile. Hesitantly Naruto continued on with Sasuke and Pakken at his heels. After a long minute, Haku let out a deep breath he had been holding and then leapt down to the forest floor, turning back to confront their enemies. He settled behind a tall oak, reflecting on his decision. They will find Gaara-kun, I know it. As long as I am here I will not allow them to pass. He knew he probably wouldn't be rejoining them after fighting off the sound nin. I am not afraid to not anymore. A span of 10 excruciatingly long minutes granted Haku the necessary time to plan an ambush, although he was uncertain of what to expect from the squad that had been following his friends. Without warning the troop of Oto ninja descended and surrounded Haku, 3 of them drawing kunai and closing in. He hadn't been able to react in time. The sound ninja recoiled angrily after shredding a water clone, knowing they had exposed themselves to a counter. Haku and a second water clone landed senbon on a number of the opposing shinobi, paralyzing the majority of them as the needles sunk into the backs of their en. 3 of them were able to evade and closed in again, wary of the needles Haku had steadied between his knuckles. I won't be able to keep this up. The fatigue he had been ignoring up until then had finally caught up with him. I'll have to use a jutsu. His last water clone was destroyed by a shinobi who was handy with a sword and Haku leapt back, preparing to use a water jutsu. He had nearly been bowled over by a tremendous wind that raked through the trees, and blew away his remaining opponents easily. Haku regained his footing, recognizing the S marks on the 3 ninja who had been hit by the gale. Temari appeared shortly after, looking smug. Haku didn't hide his relieved smile. Temari. I'm honestly glad to see you right now. He blinked when he noticed she was alone. Where's your brother? Kankuro. He's holding off the rest of them so they won't follow me. Temari frowned at him. I thought there were others with you. They went ahead, Haku said absently, taking a head count of the fallen ninja on the ground. Wait, Pakken said there were 9. There are only 8 here. What are you talking about? Move. They were barely able to dodge as shuriken rained down from the tree tops, exposing the last sound ninja. Without missing a beat, Temari swung her fan in a vicious arc, knocking him from his hiding place, and Haku landed Senbon at specific points that would render him immobile once he hit the ground. Temari closed her fan, looking grim. We have to find Gaara before he's made to transform. We haven't got a lot of time left. Haku stared at her suspiciously. How do you know that? Because, it was what my sensei briefed us on earlier during the exam, Temari admitted grudgingly. They made Gaara a key part in the destruction of this village. Then why are you helping me? His hostility was quickly returning. You're on their side. No, I'm not. Even if I should be, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. Kankuro and I refused the mission. We aren't going to let them hurt our brother. That was all Haku had to hear. He smiled in relief. Then I should thank you. I really am sorry for what? Enough. Save it for later. Temari didn't want him to get mushy. Quit loafing around and follow me. She leapt away and he flanked her without question, finally holding her in high esteem. Keiken, what do we do now? A dark-haired woman shrunk behind her husband in horror as their Chunin escort dropped S to the ground in front of them. They've cornered us. She had good reason to be frightened. At the time of their evacuation they had already come under attack, leaving civilians to flee the fighting while ninja attempted to protect them. Their escort, however, had no warning once he had been S by 2 crazed cloud ninja. Now they had no defense and were likely to be K next, but what she feared more than anything was the safety of her daughter, Tama. Her husband, equally as brave as his brother Guy, sucker punched one of the unwary nin before backing away again. Quiet, Miyako, you'll have to leave now while I hold them off. He stood in front of her, fiercely protective, but he doubted he'd be able to contend against ninja. He was a banker for heaven's sake. The other Kumo nin glared at him and prepared a favored lightning jutsu, intending to finish them. That was, until another leaf ninja S into him before he could use his technique. It was an instant knockout. Ken blinked down at the genin who had saved their lives, indistinctly recognizing him. You're one of Guy's students, aren't you? Neji blinked at him, noting how the man speaking to him resembled his sensei, yet with less prominent features. Miyako stepped out from behind her husband, looking deeply grateful. I am, he said flatly. He hadn't been intending to rescue civilians, but his conscience, though narrow and abused, got the better of him. Are you all right? Ken nodded. For now. We're headed for the garrison. Can you take us there? Neji nodded and activated his Byakugan. Stay close. There are at least a dozen more approaching. You'll have to run if we're to avoid them. Whatever you say, Hyuga-san. Miyako looked up for the challenge and grinned just like her daughter did. She tagged along behind Neji as he went ahead, her husband rushing to keep up. Neji disliked their lack of speed, but was aware that they were not nearly as fit as ninja would be, and more than likely scared beyond comprehension. They had covered an excellent amount of distance. The street had been cleared of most enemy ninja by the leaf shinobi who had passed through. Unfortunately, one squad of sound ninja remained and decided the 3 stragglers on the road below would be easy prey. Neji had seen them long before they had decided to ambush him. He turned to his charge. Stay back, I'll finish them. Although curious as to who he had been referring to, the road was clear. They backed up anyway, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire again. The 4 Otonin leapt down from their position on a nearby bridge and Neji easily dispatched them with a single rotation that sent them crashing into the display window of a small shop. Ken raised an eyebrow at the impressive display of strength, now understanding why Guy took every opportunity he had to brag about his students. After Neji had determined it's safe to continue, they moved on, silent and guarded. As promised, the Hyuga prodigy delivered them to the barracks within 5 minutes. It had been about the same time Tama, alongside Lee and Tenten, had arrived with Anko. With a sigh, Neji accepted the graud as Tama rushed to her parents eagerly. Mom. Dad, you're okay. She hugged her father and then turned to their escort and grinned. Thanks Neji, I owe you. Lee and Tenten were quick to spot their teammate and flocked to him, glad to finally be reunited. Neji frowned at him. You could have found me sooner. I was waiting. Tenten shrugged, long since over her grudge against the Hyuga. Sorry. Lee and I had to kick some B before finding you. You know the drill. In fact he did. Aruka. Neji turned to see a Chunin rushing toward the academy teacher who was tending to his class of undergraduates. We have a report that Cloud has infiltrated the village along with Sound and Sand, but they're strictly hunting Hyuga. We've lost 4 shinobi to them already. Are all of your students here? Aruka nodded. They are, although those who were watching the finals at the exam are still at the stadium. He frowned inwardly, including Hyuga Hanabi. I'm afraid all we can do is have them gather here. We can't afford to go out and find all of them. Neji looked away, his expression dark. It was bad enough people were but to have people of his own clan targeted during the confusion was more than what he could stomach. He turned to his teammates. I can't stay here, I have to find Hinata-sama and Hanabi-sama. Lee nodded. Then we shall go as well. We will shoulder this endeavor with you. We have to go now before we're accounted for, Tenten added in a whisper. A moment later they were gone, but their absence had not gone unnoticed. Aruka immediately had a fit upon noting the disappearance. They'll get themselves out there. What are they thinking? Tama turned to her old teacher. Aruka-sensei, I think they'll be okay. They brought me and my family here, but I don't think they're quite done helping out yet. After a moment he nodded to her in understanding, returning to his panicked students. Where do you think you're taking us? Away from here. But you can't keep us safe. You're too weak. Take us back to that Aberrane boy. Hanabi was indignant as her older sister led her away from the arena, watching the streets vigilantly with her Byakugan. Where is he anyway? Father told me to take you far from the stadium, so I will. Hinata announced in finality. Shino-kun went to make sure Sato-kun made it to the hospital safely. We must stay out of sight until father finds us. But I don't want to. Hanabi, please. Hinata silenced her, flashing her white eyes desperately. I am doing all that I can, please accept that. Hanabi fell silent, disgruntled, even though she had known her sister was only doing what she had been told. Hanabi was not sure what was going on or how to avoid the invading shinobi. Hinata fled to the cover of a nearby park with her younger sister close in tow. It was quiet and shady there and would provide sufficient protection until their father came to collect them. She sat beneath a maple tree, motioning for her sister to take a place beside her. They sat in silence and Hinata deactivated her Byakugan, rubbing at her aching eyes. Hanabi paid her no mind and remained watchful of their surroundings, then suggested, why don't we just return home? Wouldn't it be safer there? Hinata shook her head. No, father said that we are not to go there. And why not? I don't know, she truthfully didn't. Like Hanabi, she too had first thought of the Hyuga compound a safe place to be during an attack. It was well guarded and in a strategically defensible area. Hiyashi, however, had stressed that they do not go there under any circumstances. Hanabi, tired and hungry, rested her head on her sister's shoulder, feeling supremely bored. She'd have preferred to stay and watch the action at the stadium, but she doubted Hinata would be able to stand it. Hinata shifted and pulled her sister to her feet, before running headlong into the more thickly wooded area of the park. What are you doing? Hanabi hissed, not liking being handled so roughly. Why can't we just? She saw the Byakugan illuminating her sister's eyes again, and it was then she understood that they were in danger. Glancing over her shoulder as they rushed through the underbrush, Hanabi could make out 3 ninja pursuing them, making a raucous as they crashed through the treetops. They're chasing us. She squealed in horror, her eyes wide. What do they want with us? Hinata didn't answer as she kept running, soon pulling her smaller sibling into her arms and leaping into the trees at great speed, doing her best not to become hysterical. She could see with her Kekkei Genkai their hunters closing in rapidly, and she knew that they didn't need a good reason to attack them if they had raided their village in the first place. Boldly, Hinata dropped back down to the ground and faced the enemy ninja with her sister clinging to her in fright. For the first time in a long while she was not afraid. Even if there was no guarantee that she would leave unharmed, Hinata refused to let them near Hanabi. Judging by their headbands she could tell immediately they were from Kumogakure, and Hinata quickly realized their intentions. They've long been after the secrets of the Byakugan. They've sought us out on purpose. She stood in front of Hanabi while the Cloud Ninja snickered openly. What's your name, girlie? One of them asked, as if he wanted a specific answer. We only want main house brats this time, not those branch slugs who have their eyes disintegrate after UKM. Hanabi, stay here, Hinata muttered under her breath, not wanting the Kumo ninja over here. I promise you'll be alright. Hanabi sniffled, upset that she was totally reliant on her older sister for protection. She could only hope she had become stronger as the blonde dope said she had. Not telling us, huh? The impatient Cloud Shinobi asked, eyeing Hinata. That's fine, we'll just take our chances. You look like you have the right eyes. Two of her shadow clones that had been hidden in a nearby tree tackled him, knocking him out with a few precise jabs of Yuken before the other two shinobi destroyed them, angered that they had been fooled. Hinata charged with a cry, scanning for Tenketsu as she attacked. They ganged up on her in a pincer movement, with kunai, and were again foiled with another shadow clone. Just where is that sorry little boy? They were sent flying by a sudden burst of spinning chakra that Hinata recognized all too well. Hanabi scurried over to her sister and father as they made sure the opposing ninja were unable to cause them further trouble. Hinata blinked up at her father gratefully. Father, I did as you asked. What are we to do now? Be silent and stay close to me, he replied curtly, pleased by his eldest daughter's cunning strategy. It appears Cloud have come here with the intentions of picking off Hyuga during the fighting and we are at the greatest risk at this time. Is that why we can't go home? Hanabi squeaked, trying to keep up with her father and sister as they soared through the forest with startling speed. It would be foolish. There is no one there presently, Hiashi explained. The Cloud will be waiting there for stragglers, but in times like these the Hyuga do not return to the compound. They gather at the garrison as all others do. Do they know where it is? Hinata asked worriedly, hoping they wouldn't be followed any further. No, her father answered, but we are still a fair distance away from it. We must move quickly. Once passing through a large clearing in the forest there was a confusing warning cry, and 10 enemy ninja deserted their positions among the trees and surrounded the family of Hyuga, as if they had been expecting them. Hiashi merely kept moving and met the Kumo ninja head-on, blowing him away with a massive rotation that left a crater half the size of the entire forest clearing. Otherwise a ninja kept a fair distance away from the range of his rotation and drove him away from his children as they fought. The last thing Hiashi intended was for his daughters to be taken, not when he had a say in the matter. Hinata fought bravely, but 4-on-1 was a devious matchup while she tried to defend her sister from the hail of shuriken and kunai that came at them in endless rounds. She battled defensively, knowing there was little chance she could defeat them as her chakra was beginning to dwindle. Hanabi hurled kunai skillfully from behind her sister that the Cloud Ninja had discarded, landing few hits that were not fatal. She paused in her motions as she watched shuriken sail past Hinata, her arm open in a spray of scarlet. Hinata paid no mind to her injury and continued on, gradually wearing down. Hanabi ducked behind her, tugging on her jacket. Enough. Let's run now. You don't have to do this. No. Her sister hollered, her eyes blazing. They won't let us get away. I will not back down. A vicious kick sent Hinata crashing to the ground and Hanabi scuttled behind her, fearing the finishing blow that was due any moment. From afar, Hiashi made little progress against a clever Junin who had directed his squad to form a wall of lightning. Hinata stared at the Kumo nin who was closing in, looking pleased as he prepared a fistful of shuriken. If it's me that's alright, just not Hanabi. Oh Naruto-kun, I fought so hard, but will you ever know? Will you ever know how I? He fell back, finished, and the remaining 3 ninjas scattered as more leaf shinobi appeared, surrounding Hinata and her sister, well aware of the Cloud Ninja's goals. Lee made short work of the 3 spineless Kumo nin even with his injured arm, and across the way Neji was assisting his uncle in finishing off the last of the importunate Cloud Shinobi. Hinata and Hanabi stared wide-eyed at Tenten as she stood over the body of the fallen Kumo ninja. Not an ounce of regret was visible on her face. It appeared she was making certain the enemy was that crazy girl just someone. Hanabi stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Tenten, too distraught to think clearly. Hinata hobbled to her feet shortly after, putting pressure on her arm. Hanabi, shush. She's on our side, calm down. Are you alright, Hinata-san? Hanabi-san. Lee, predictably, had gone to make sure the 2 girls were intact. Neji and his uncle approached as well, looking satisfied with their methods of demolishing the opposing shinobi. Tenten seemed to snap out of her trance and hurried over to the Hyuga girls a moment later. You're not hurt, are you? Is it bad? Hinata shook her head. No, it's just a scratch and the bee has already stopped. The brown-haired girl sighed in relief, almost as if she had been anticipating worse. We leave now, Hiashi commanded, not inclined to linger. He herded the group along, silently grateful his nephew had taken the initiative to search for them. Without his help he doubted things could have ended as well as they had. Aruka had immediately neglected the angered speech he had prepared to give to Team Guy once he saw them return with Hiashi and his two daughters. He fell silent and then smiled to himself, knowing that he should have expected as much of them, and that Tama had been right all along. A medic quickly went to see to the new additions, examining Hinata's wound and making sure that Hanabi was not injured either, all the while Hiashi glared at him like a vigilant hawk. It was enough of a distraction for Neji and Lee to find Tenten as she sulked near the entrance of the barracks, cleaning off the blade of her sword with a frown. Lee, for once, could think of nothing to say. He stood near her while trying to look cheerful, but it was difficult when she seemed so upset. Neji watched her with steady white eyes, waiting for her to speak. I'm sorry you two had to see that, I hadn't planned it, Tenten admitted, putting the sword away. They were in danger. It was the only thing I could think to do. You should not feel badly about it, Tenten. Lee understood and it made her feel better. Lee always understood her, even if things seemed unbearable. I'm used to it by now, I guess, she shrugged, finding her conscience was not bothering her at all. It wasn't nearly as bad as the first time. The mission to retrieve the Yumi then? Neji inquired, sharp as ever. She nodded and he closed his eyes, deep in thought. It was the first time Tenten was able to sense the anxiety radiating from her teammates simultaneously. She hoped that it wasn't a bad thing, but it felt surprisingly good to get it off her and see they hadn't made a fuss over it. Exhausted, they all took a seat on an unoccupied bench, looking ready to doze off. Just as things appeared to be looking up, another Hyuga approached. It seemed Neji recognized him, but he said nothing as the boy rushed up to Hiashi with a report. Hiashi-sama, one of the main house was taken by Cloud. Anyone else? No sir, but, the boy swallowed fearfully, it was my younger brother sir, when we were leaving the compound. They threatened to kill him unless they can get you or either of your daughters. Hiashi was silent. He understood the pain of having a brother being S to the Cloud. The young man fought back tears, refusing to show emotion that was swiftly overwhelming him. I won't ask this of you, Hiashi-sama, but I fear for my brother. I offered my own life, but they will have no one else. Hiashi stared at him for a long moment, thinking, and then turned to Hinata as she sat kneeling beside her younger sister. Their eyes met and she understood. Neji leapt up frantically from his place near the wall, not having any of it. Hiashi-sama, please, I will go. In Hinata-sama's stead I can. Be silent, Neji, this doesn't concern you. Hiashi wasn't in the mood to hear any protests. Neji fell quiet but stayed where he was, unable to believe Hinata was going to be sent as collateral. It would have been different if he could have been traded, but after fighting Naruto and seeing that Hinata had already risked so much for herself and the people she cared about, he wasn't about to let her be forsaken. I will let this decision fall to you. Hiashi spoke directly to Hinata, his voice distant. As my eldest daughter, you have already proven to be wise and courageous. Choose what you believe to be best. The anxious main houseboy stared at her fearfully and Hinata smiled at him, not even remotely upset. She had gotten a bit of a head rush from her father commending her, but Hinata had found that the solution was rather simple. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Hinata replicated herself perfectly with a shorthand seal, startling those who watched. The look of pride on Hiashi's face was a nice change. Take this shadow clone and retrieve your brother. Go quickly. Relieved, the boy grinned and guided the clone along. He left with his squad of fellow Chunin to make the exchange. Neji, frozen to the spot, let a small smile dawn on his lips. Naruto, you are right about Hinata-sama. No one is more worthy than she to be responsible for the safety of my clan. I am grateful to you both. Stop. Both Naruto and Sasuke halted and turned to Pakin. The pug looked unnerved by something, and they hoped that their trail hadn't been picked up again by enemy ninja. Gaara's trail ends here, we can't go any further. And also, the dog paused, there's a monster up ahead. Are you serious? Naruto was thoroughly distressed. I thought we'd make it in time before he'd Before what? Sasuke was fed up with being in the dark. Why don't you just explain what's? Look out. The dog howled. He retreated and they followed as a huge, rattling tail was visible above the tree tops as it crashed down, just barely missing them. The tremor was monstrous and easily crushed all nearby trees. Naruto glared up at the towering figure of the sand demon that had completely possessed his friend. I'll save you. I swear. How? Sasuke wasn't nearly as optimistic after observing the monstrous tanuki. If that thing has him, you'll need something just as large too. Naruto had finished making hand seals, focusing a huge amount of chakra that even left the Uchiha baffled. Kuchio's no jutsu. A billowing cloud of smoke erupted and obscured a majority of the forest, forcing Pakken back a ways. Sasuke was at first only aware that they had risen a considerable height into the air. What exactly had been summoned, however, was unclear to him. This creature is huge. Can Naruto really summon something as massive as this? The Uchiha stood, securing his footing, and was finally able to see just how enormous the sand beast ahead of them was. Sasuke, Naruto's voice was low, that's Gaara over there, see? And he can't help anything that happens from here out. Even if he attacks us, all of this is that snake bee fault, Orochimaru. Sasuke gingerly touched the seal on his end, recalling the loathsome snake, realizing he wasn't the only one being made to suffer at his hands. What the? Gamabunta blinked in confusion at his surroundings. What the hell am I doing here? Hey, Chief Toad, Naruto called, you've got to help me out. My friend's in trouble. Oh, not you again. Gamabunta grunted, recognizing Naruto from the previous encounters. What do you have to bug me for? It was then he noticed the massive demon ahead of them thrashing its tail wildly in anticipation. That is the Ichibi no Shukaku, the dreaded demon of the sand. Gamabunta recalled a brief bit of history about the creature. Isn't that a sight only a mother could love? Come on, Chief Toad. Naruto was grinning, help me fight this thing. No, this isn't just some joy ride. This is for real. Naruto insisted, desperate, if we don't do something Gaara-kun might s. You mean that weird sand kid? Yeah, that's him. Naruto confirmed, growing frantic. He's too much like you then, I suppose. Gamabunta muttered in annoyance, well, I guess I should help you since you've been my henchman for some time now. Naruto was embarrassed by the comment. Sasuke gave the blonde-haired boy an inquiring look. You serve a toad. It's a long story. Naruto dismissed the subject, his eyes widening as Shukaku screeched in delight, launching immense sand shuriken their way. Hang on. As the blonde boy had predicted, Gamabunta leapt into the sky to avoid the attack. Naruto had little trouble keeping his hold on the toad, but Sasuke had to scramble to stay aboard, not at all prepared for it. Even more dubious to the Uchiha was how Naruto looked, as if he enjoyed the sensation of flight while it was curdling his stomach. Back on the ground, Gamabunta drew out his dagger, preparing to attack. Here goes. The toad raced forward with bizarre speed, wildly at Shukaku and tearing off one of its arms as it moved to counter. The blade went flying after severing the huge sand appendage, and the Ichibi reeled back, howling in outrage. Gamabunta noted that Naruto was not the only one on board at that time. One of his eyes rolled up to examine who was on top of his head. An Uchiha. Sasuke stared into the large yellow eye that had glanced up at him and nodded. What of it? Use a fire jutsu now. Gamabunta inhaled deeply. I said now. The sand demon had regained its balance and turned around to face them, cursing at the impudent toad and his lackeys. Just do it. Naruto hollered, not understanding but confident that Gamabunta obviously had his reasons. Sasuke decided to oblige the giant toad and formed hand seals. Kaiten, Gyu no Jutsu. The boss toad spat out a mouthful of oil and Sasuke's jutsu ignited it. The attack enveloped the raging sand demon in a storm of flames that stretched over almost the entirety of the forest. Even the Uchiha admitted there was no fire jutsu nearly as powerful in his clan compared to what the toad was capable of. Air bullet. The sand beast pounded on its gut, firing a condensed orb of wind and chakra that sailed through the flames directly towards Gamabunta. The toad boss had barely any time to dodge and leapt abruptly, knocking Naruto and Sasuke from his back. With the aid of a chain of shadow clones, Naruto quickly pulled himself back onto the toad's head as he soared over the treetops and watched helplessly as Sasuke dropped down into the forest below. Damn it. There goes Sasuke. But he's probably better off staying out of this. Sasuke avoided the giant toad as it lumbered out of the way of Shukaku's attacks, not wanting to get stepped on. Pakken quickly discovered him. Sasuke, we can't stay here. There's nothing else you can do in this fight. He followed the dog, glancing back in wonder at Naruto as he stood steadily on the Toad boss's head. We've got to do something, Chief Toad. Naruto's insides were twisting as he watched Gaara's sleeping form hanging limp atop the Ichibi's head. Think you can get us closer? Does it look like my legs fell off or something? Gamabunta grumbled before leaping at the enemy, only to get walloped in the head by an unexpected tail swipe from Shukaku. It barreled the toad over and the demon laughed heartily, its screeches echoed for miles. Gamabunta righted himself, making sure Naruto was still on his head. "Nye, I admit I'm a bit out of shape. Now you're starting to sound like Ero Sennin," Naruto pointed out, not liking the excuse. "Got any more bright ideas, you little squirt?" The toad barked resentfully, knowing that the genin had a point. Temari skimmed above the treetops on her fan with Haku, keeping a lookout for Gaara. Even if they had set aside the differences all for the sake of the red-haired boy, it was still a bit constraining to suddenly have to work together. "That's it up ahead, isn't it?" Haku asked, noting a dust cloud swirling and the outlined figure of a gigantic beast that thrashed about, shrieking in fiendish delight. Temari narrowed her eyes, deciding to fly higher to get a better look. "There's nothing we can do now, we're too late. We'd be K before we could reverse the transformation. Giving up is not going to save him." Haku's voice was grim. "If you aren't willing to fight, then stay here." "What are you doing?" Temari's eyes widened in shock as Haku leapt from her fan, totally bent on saving his friend. "Are you crazy?" A small ice mirror had formed in midair and he landed on it, assessing the situation. Shukaku was in plain sight, rapidly demolishing the surrounding forest, and Gaara just barely visible on the monster's head. Far to his left he could see Naruto had already summoned Gamabunta, and he took it as a good sign. "Temari's right, I can't stop this thing, but maybe I can slow it down so Naruto-kun can." Temari circled back around, refusing to leave. She was frustrated that Haku was foolish enough to believe he could make a difference. The Ichibi continued attacking Gamabunta, completely unaware of Haku as he began to form hand seals. "This is the jutsu I learned from the Forbidden Scroll, one that I would never have had enough chakra to perform, until now." Willingly he drew on the power of the cursed seal, calling on as much of the dark chakra as he could stand. Haku stared ahead at his target, black scales creeping across his skin. "It isn't too late. I can do this." Haku finished sealing, surrounded by turbulent dark chakra. "Suten, Susaha." Water began to condense from thin air immediately, swirling around the Shukaku in a massive current. Upon witnessing it, Gamabunta found the sheer bulk of water outrageous. That is a jutsu only known to the second Hokage. He looked to see Haku in the distance, following through with the jutsu. "That boy is a fool, using that much chakra will K him." "Haku-kun, stop it." Naruto's cries went unheard. He could only watch helplessly as the airborne current of water closed in around the Ichibi, slowing its movements. "Little morsel has made a puddle for me to play in." Shukaku jeered at the genin, challenging him. "What fun. I'll K you next." "Freeze." Haku commanded and the water obeyed. The current surrounding the Ichibi's remaining arm froze into blades of ice and severed the sand appendage. Shukaku reared back its head and screamed in outrage. Gamabunta looked on in silent astonishment and Naruto grinned, impressed by the attack. The ice dropped down to the forest below with Haku having no more chakra to control it. The seal was pure agony and Haku flailed for a moment, unable to concentrate. Unfortunately the Ichibi recovered fast. Air bullet. Another wave of chakra-thick air was aimed for Haku and missed, but the impact from the blast knocked him from the sky and sent him plummeting to the woods below, unconscious. "Haku-kun." Naruto couldn't contain himself any longer. The Ichibi was tormenting his friends and he had to put an end to it. Temari flew beneath the dark-haired boy and caught him, mumbling, "Leaf shinobi are such idiots." She was honestly astounded by the attack she had witnessed and glad she hadn't been at its receiving end. Shukaku stomped about, armless, babbling to itself in a rage. Gamabunta took advantage of its distraction. Water bullet. The blast hit the Ichibi directly in the back and it turned around, yowling in fury, awakening its sand to attack again. "Naruto, the only way to get rid of this demon is to wake that kid up," the Toad boss explained, dodging blasts of sand and wind. It's the only way this will end before the whole place ends up looking like a desert. How do I do that? The blonde boy asked, looking confounded. Just give him a good smack. He was startled by what a simple solution it was, and Gamabunta closed in on the sand spirit, grappling with it, and was promptly knocked back by its thrashing tail that was followed by another air bullet. Chief Toad, what's going on? I can't hit him if you don't get me close enough. Naruto steadied himself as Gamabunta leapt back from Shukaku, trying to regroup. I can't get a grip on that thing. I don't have any teeth or claws. The toad retorted, frustrated. It appears this calls for a combination transformation. What's that exactly? The blonde boy was unclear on the subject. I provide the chakra for the jutsu and you provide the seal. Since I never was very good at performing them, Gamabunta explained hurriedly, think of something we can take the shape of, something with teeth and claws. Now hurry. He charged ahead again, not giving Naruto much time to think of a useful form. Teeth and claws, huh? For Naruto, only one thing came to mind, I hope this works. Gamabunta transformed and the Ichibi was confronted by a monstrous fox demon that was running full pelt towards it, plucking up trees on its way with its many tails and hurling them at the enemy to stall him. The Kyuubi disguised toad bit down on the sand spirit, getting a sure hold. Now squirt. Get going. Right. Naruto broke off the transformation and leaped from the toad boss's head, landing on Shukaku's snout. He could feel the massive beast moving, trying to knock Gamabunta back again, and Naruto stumbled up the face of the Ichibi, trying not to sink into the turbulent sand. The blonde boy reached Gaara while he slept and grabbed him roughly by the shoulders. Gaara-kun, this is for being a stubborn bee. Naruto delivered a head bee that was more than enough to dispel the jutsu that had forced Gaara to sleep, and it left him cross-eyed. Gaara woke rather suddenly, eyes widened bee, and Naruto grinned for a moment before tumbling backwards as Shukaku thrashed furiously, no longer in control of its host. Gamabunta watched approvingly as the huge sand beast began to crumble and break apart. Well, that about does it. I'm beat. Time to go home. The toad boss departed in a cloud of smoke. Both Jinchuriki fell back down to the forest below as the sand dissolved, and Naruto rushed frantically to his friend through the tree tops, still uncertain if he was going to be alright. Gaara. He leapt over to where Gaara had settled, bent awkwardly at the base of a tree, shuddering as he suppressed the angry demon that had just been forced back under his control. Gaara's in bad shape and he's still hurting from the injuries he got during the exam. Naruto crouched beside the red-haired boy. What's going to happen to him now? He could remember the fear that had been in Gaara's eyes as he suffered through long nights of the Ichibi's heartless babble. I'll never let this happen again. Gaara, you don't deserve this. Step aside, Naruto. The blonde boy looked up to see his sensei pushing past him, making his way to Gaara. Come on, kid. Sit up straighter. Jiraiya immediately went to work on the damaged seal, and Naruto was left to wonder how he had even known there was something wrong with it in the first place. He's been gone since yesterday, that useless bum. Ultimately, Naruto was glad to see the perverted sage. Temari appeared shortly after, carrying the weight of an unconscious Haku on her shoulder. She walked over to Naruto and gently plopped the water nin down beside him. Here, he'll be alright, but he sure is an idiot. The blonde boy chuckled. Yeah, sometimes he is. They watched Jiraiya finish his work and then sigh, fishing through his pocket and drawing out a pipe. Damn, you sure a lucky sand kid. He patted the boy on his head affectionately. You held out pretty well. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. Thank you. Gaara said quietly, not yet ready to look at his sensei. There was a part of him that was still ashamed that he had lost control of himself. Temari kneeled beside the red-haired boy and hugged him, smiling widely. Wow. I didn't realize your team would handle all this so well. He closed his eyes, liking the closeness. You have no idea. Kankuro arrived shortly after with Sasuke and Pakken, and the sand ninja quickly reunited with his siblings, surprised to see they were relatively unharmed. I knew you wouldn't betray me. Gaara smiled at his brother and sister, ignoring their alarmed faces. Sasuke sat down by Haku, exhausted, and wondered what exactly had just happened. Naruto watched Gaara interact with his siblings briefly before turning to his sensei. He was startled to see that Jiraiya had been staring at him in silence. Ero-sensei, is something wrong? Jiraiya closed his eyes, sighing deeply. No, Naruto, I guess not. The Toad Sage recalled from a short time ago how he had abandoned his sensei in the stadium in order to save his students from Orochimaru's treachery. He hoped the third would hold out and defeat the snake, yet he felt that he should have stayed to help somehow, even if there was little he could do. Now was not the time for regrets. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.